Hello, and welcome to the Struggles to Success podcast, the podcast that helps you use struggles to become better, stronger, and more successful. I am Dr. Emmanuel Nsutebu. I'm the host of this podcast and author of the book From Struggles to Success. Your struggles can make you better, stronger, and more successful. It's a pleasure to have all the support for this podcast, all of you listening to the podcast, all the comments. And so please keep on sharing the podcast, liking the podcast, and telling more people about this podcast. This episode is going to be an interesting one. It's quite a personal one. You can see the person who is sitting next to me probably looks very much like me. And it's no other than my father. And so this is going to be really an interesting one, and also a one that I've been looking very forward to, from struggle to success. Now, some say from our elders that what our elders can see sitting down, we can't see standing up or on top of a tree. And I think this is going to be really interesting. And I think this quote is going to be the theme of this podcast. And I am blessed, very happy that we're going to have the wisdom of my father. And he's no other than Mr. Zachary Nsutebu, who is now retired, but a lot of people listening to this podcast would know him. He worked as a town planner, so he's a town planner, worked as a town planner in Cameroon, and also worked in the University of Buea as Director of Development. He's now retired, living in Bamenda, the northwest of Cameroon, and running a farm in the northwest of Cameroon, despite all the difficulties currently there with the conflict. So without much ado, I really want to welcome Papa to this podcast. Papa, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
So the theme of the book is struggles to success, and people who are famous, people who are successful, always have a story, or have stories of struggles that they've used to become better, stronger, and more successful. And so I wondered whether you wanted to start by sharing your own life experience, and I'm sure there's a lot that you can tell us. We can be here the whole day, I'm sure. However, I thought you would have some significant ones that stand out that you'd like to share. So over to you, Papa. Tell us, what is your story of struggle to success?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my lifetime experiences with you and others who will listen to me. And I was so happy to have gone through your book several times. And when I read through the book the first time and second time, it appears you were trying to capture my whole life in your book of struggle and successes, because it seemed to reflect my experiences. I'm about 80 years old, and that's a lifetime.
That was not planned.
Yes.
That was not planned. I wasn't planning to reflect you. but maybe because I'm your son, I also people say now in Africa that your children are often a reflection of yourself.
Yeah.
And so maybe the things that you taught me that I was consciously reflecting in the book.
Yeah. In particular, it also sort of hinges on my profession as a planner. In the process of planning, you are faced with so many struggles, and you have also to appreciate the successes you have made, which have had a lifetime experience as a planner. And so I have two areas of importance that I want to share. First, my successes and struggles as the first son in a family, an extended family that has family responsibilities, at the same time my own personal concerns and interests. The second one is my experiences as one of the earliest who got training in town planning and had to try to get the country and the people involved in decision making and the beneficiaries to understand the value of planning. It's been a long journey, and along it there have been several struggles and several successes. And I personally have seen successes and struggles as a continuum. It's not something that you can say, I'm fully successful or fully failed. It's something you keep doing, so on. So this is what I want to share, the experiences in the family and my professional experiences with those who may be encountering the same problems.
Interesting. The first one of the things you said there is that a struggle is not a success. Success is not really a destination. It's continuous, and you get to one place and you keep going, and so you never really arrive. So the different definitions of success. I also are reflecting on a lot of people that I meet. Some of them you don't remember, but often I meet people, introduce myself, and they will ask about you and also tell me how you have inspired them in some way. Um, People who are my friends, classmates, people who have come across you in their life, either professionally or on a personal level, as friends and family. And certainly for us in the family, you have really been a source of inspiration. As you said, we come from humble beginnings with um, our my granddad, late Papa today, may his soul rest in peace, and having quite a big family living in remote area of Cameroon in Batu village, and now we have a quite a big family with members of the family all over the world, doing quite well in Cameroon and out of Cameroon and making a difference in other parts of the world. And nobody would have predicted that. And you have been very instrumental in also doing that. And there have been a lot of struggles, some which I know and some which I don't know. And so I wondered whether you want to start with the family. What are the struggles? What is this main struggle? What your story do you want to tell us about struggles to success related to the family?
Well, I'm glad you've touched on the aspect of education because I was the first in the nuclear family of Nsutebu to go to school. And when I went to school, I realized that education seemed to be the most important thing you can afford in a family. And so I had to spend my life trying to educate myself and getting others educated. It's not easy to do the two. Some people focus on educating themselves and neglect the others. So I've been able to pilot up both of this, move it forward, myself and others around me. And I'm fairly comfortable now because around me I have enlightened people, and the aspiration to educate has broadened the scope of the family, which is a great thing. And how did I do this? The first thing is to accept that life is a pendulum between struggle and successes. Each time you come across a struggle and so on, you should see it as an opportunity for you to identify first your strengths, your weaknesses, and the opportunities. And once you do that, you'll be able now to see how you can sort of guide you in your future actions. But if you do not understand that, you just get frustrated and it sort of dampens your concerns and so on. And
I really like the analogy of it's a pendulum.
yes,
It's always swinging from struggle to success. It's
yeah.
not a permanent state, and that's really a analogy that I really like. And so when you are in a struggle, don't feel it's the end of the road, and you always remain there. You need to use it to get to the other side. Also, in the pendulum, if you work a pendulum well, you can actually get to the other side quickly, and also even higher. And that's probably what you need to do. Use the struggle to propel you to become more successful.
And in this process, there are a few things that we have to take note of. That each time there's a struggle, there's a problem, you first take your responsibility. It either demonstrates that you do not understand what the others want or need, and therefore the homework is yours. It's not necessarily those other people whom you think are creating you problems. So you have to go back and try to see how you can make yourself understood and how you can understand the other people so that you have now a common vision of where you're going to. But if you just get frustrated and say, oh, you have failed and so on, you will not progress. So you take responsibility for your struggles, for the problems you encounter.
So that's let's just pause there a bit. You're saying you should, when faced with a struggle, you should look inwards. Often the first reaction is looking outwards. Who's to blame? Who did this? Who contributed to this? But you're saying really one lesson is look inwards first and see what you can do. Often we're also contributors. Nearly always we're contributing in some way, consciously or unconsciously, to an issue, a problem, a struggle. But also you're saying you should, part of the solution is looking inwards first. And if you point the finger and blame everybody else, then you're not going to be able to move from A to B.
Yeah, so that's the approach, especially within the context of a family. The other thing which will guide you, manage your struggles, and then enable you succeed is to be able to understand that everybody has an interest. And therefore, if you want to put your interest ahead, then it becomes an obstacle for you to move towards success. So you have to see the other's interest. And for them to buy your idea and get on board, they have to see you concerned about their own interest. And therefore, you should downplay your own interest along the line for you to be able to make the point.
That's do you have an example of a story you want to tell that encapsulates or demonstrates what you've just told us about the pendulum, but also about looking inwards and also looking at other people's interests when you're faced with a struggle in order to convert a struggle into success?
Yeah, in the family context, it's fairly a difficult thing, because what happens is that once you're doing something, you generally think that you are following your own interest. So what you have to do, especially to get people educated, is to try to show the benefit of education on the other people rather than only for yourself. In the same process, you're educating yourself, and then you appreciate their difficulties. Some reject things not because they don't want them, it's because they do not understand. So you have to do the homework of going around cajoling them to understand and accept the idea, to go to school, to appreciate the value of going to school, and to also see that all you're trying to do is to enable rather than to benefit, and so on. And the other thing which has helped me through my life is that if you want to do things in the general interest, you should not put too much importance on what you gain, especially when it comes to money. The principle which has guided me is this: if I can get something done with that money, I would rather do it than go look for money to come do it. Because when you do that, looking for money, you're already losing a lot of time. So you better try to get the things done and so on. So you downplay. Because the moment you're starting to look for money, people see more your interest than others. So I downplay that emphasis. And so it requires a lot of sacrifices in the context of the family to do that. So those are the sort of things that... and then the other thing which is also true is being able to educate, to sensitize, to get people understand, rather than blame and so on. You bring them closer, especially those who need. You don't keep them at a distance. You bring them closer at all costs, because it's by being close to you that they will now appreciate what you intended to and will come on board. But when you keep them at a distance, the gap widens. And therefore, you will not be able to make your point when it comes to family issues and education and things like that. And the final thing, one of the parallels I've drawn in about struggles and success is just like a boxing match or a football match. When you miss the point or you have a blow, you don't give up. What you do is you gather enough courage and change your tactics to be able to move forward. If you don't do that, you will never win a match. I don't win a boxing match. So you have to receive punches, you have to avoid punches, and you have to manage for you to win and stay on board. If not, then you're out.
So you were saying something really interesting. There were two things you said I want to reflect on. The first is the importance of not working within your resources when you're faced with a struggle and doing what you can, rather than relying on significant resources that you may never get and therefore may never be able to start. So you need to start with what you've got. The second is also not putting financial interests first, but just trying to solve the problem. If it's all about money, which it sometimes is with particular struggles, then you may not be able to do what you're trying to do, especially from an education point of view. It may not necessarily the financial value of education. And the last one is that you need to change your strategy. If you keep doing what you were doing and it's not working, you have to find another tactic, just like a boxer.
Yeah.
If it's not working, then think, what can I do differently? You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So that's really, really take-home messages for those that are listening that are really important. So thank you, Papa, for sharing that. I wondered whether you also had anything to say in terms of a specific story that you wanted to share. You've given some advice, and I wondered whether there's any example of a specific story.
Yeah, I would like to give the story of trying to start and run a family project, which is the ranch, the family ranch. And my idea, since I had the responsibility of bringing people around, keeping it together, was to bring out an idea, a project that had some corporate element where people participate and so on. And we started the projects and so on. It was difficult to get people on board. Gradually, people were coming on board and so on. But suddenly, with the crisis, the project was completely knocked out, and 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 all the animals were taken away, and I was chased away. I didn't give up. That was a struggle. I didn't give up. While away, I saw that the opportunity was for me to reevaluate what I was doing, find out the strategies that I was using, and find the causes of what has led to the problems. And that gradually got me to reorientate the project such that the interests, the interest, and the people who must have been hurt by the project in one way or the other, that their concerns are taken care of. Because in life, you're always trading on some people's toes, and you never know when you trade on the toes. It's only when you get a shock, then you start seeing what you have been doing wrong and what you ought to be doing and so on. And that has led me to go back now and restarted the project, being more careful about all the interests around and so on, in order to be able to be accepted and the idea to be accepted to continue.
And just to be a bit more specific, what interests, an example of an interest so people can understand the context?
Yeah, for example, one of the reasons why the farm was sort of destroyed or disturbed was the fact that I came home enlightened and so on, and with all the knowledge and skills about protecting environment, grass, and so on. I thought it was proper for me to sort of protect the grass and the environment around, so that I can conserve for first for my own interests and so on. And then I did not realize that the neighbors who were also doing the same thing had a common interest in that activity. And consequently, I was hurting them without knowing that I was doing some harm to them. But right now, in restarting, I've been able to streamline in terms of area of operation and so on, so that they too can get their own interests satisfied. And then I've taken the responsibility also to find a nice way of communicating to them that even though I'm confined now, they still have an interest to conserve and so on for a common interest. That requires education. And that education cannot take place when you are not relating to them, coming close to them. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yes.
Really fascinating, and that's quite personal, because before the conflict, you had set up the ranch in Batu village with 50 cattle, lots of sheep, lots of fruit trees there, mangoes, guavas, avocado. It was a heaven in the village, and all that was lost with the conflict and with armed men, gangs, really stealing everything. They walked away the cattle. That's a major, significant struggle. And I know you're back there now trying to revive it and aspects of it. And as you said, using some of the lessons from the struggle, try and turn it back into success. And it's still on a journey, that one. But you've shared how you need to reflect when you face a struggle on what things that you may have done that has contributed, and also trying to get common interests, especially for the other others, because that is certainly something. The people who were around the farm, who you mentioned to be specific, were Fulani herdsmen who also have cattle, nomadic, have cattle around the area. And so they saw that as a threat and setting up the ranch in the village where we were, as a threat to their own livelihood and their own livestock. And so now doing it again, going through that journey, one of the things you're saying you would do differently is also working with them and understanding their own interests. That's really, really useful. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yes, there's one thing I want to add to this experience. One of my problems, which of course struggle, was created by me, trying to bite more than you can chew and swallow, trying to do so many things. And then in the process, I've also learned that rather than try to cut your coat according to your size, you have to cut your coat according to your cloth. So you streamline to the things that are feasible with the means you have and so on. And that's what I'm trying to do now, to reactivate and regenerate by trimming down to the essential things which are affordable and so on. Initially, I had to do that to learn anyway. In the process of life, learning is a continuous action, and you cannot learn without making mistakes.
That's really interesting. And what you've just demonstrated there, just to pause and take stock, the story highlights, you've just demonstrated, highlights what you started off saying about life being a pendulum from problems to success, about looking inwards when you're faced with a struggle, and the struggle we had on the ranch, and partly was looking inwards. Although a lot of it was because of the conflict, because without the conflict, there wouldn't have been the instability for them to have destroyed the ranch and all the things that they stole from the ranch. But however, it may have been a bit different if they were also on your side, and also we're looking at other people's interests when you're faced with a struggle, not using your own resources, not expecting to have cutting your clothes according to the size of your cloth, and also changing your tactics. And you said if learning from this time is also not making the same mistakes that were made last time. So really, that story really encapsulates what you've been highlighting about turning struggles into success. Really, I appreciate this time that we're spending together. You may not know, and I didn't say that, but I'll say it now, that I'm in Cameroon. And so Papa Nsutebu is actually with me in Cameroon in a room. And that's why you see also the background. So I just thought whilst here, I had to take the opportunity to have this podcast recording and conversation to share his wisdom. So we're going to continue with the conversation. And I wonder whether you had other stories to share in terms of struggles to success.
Yeah, I would like to share my experience, professional experience. And as I said earlier, I was one of the earliest to enter the profession of town planning in Cameroon. And I grew from bottom up, learning town planning and trying to do it. And along this process, there are lots of struggle, especially you're dealing in a community where there have been no experience in planning. Wow. So to get the idea accepted, to get the ideas accepted, to even accept you and you practicing
Accept
the thing.
you and the idea you're trying to bring in, a new idea.
Yeah, new idea. Was quite a struggle.
A new way of doing things.
A new way of doing things. A struggle in several dimensions. You're struggling with those who make decisions to accept the idea of planning. You're struggling with those who will benefit from planning to accept that it will help them. So you're struggling all through the process, and it's not been easy. If you don't have that patience and that tolerance, you will give up.
So that is a major problem. Those of you who know cities in Cameroon will acknowledge that there are major problems with town planning, if there is any. And it's, he said, struggles to success. Success is a journey. You have made your own contribution. The town planning in Cameroon is not where it should be. So I don't think anybody will be able to say we have successful town planning in Cameroon, but it's a country-wide problem, and it's a major problem throughout. And you have made your own contribution. So I wondered whether you wanted to share any specific example of how exactly the struggle was when you were bringing in the new idea of we should be really planning our towns properly, and what we should be doing in terms of town planning and development of cities, Cameroon.
Yeah, although towns in Cameroon are not planned and so on, my experience and contribution has demonstrated that Cameroon has moved forward just by accepting the idea that planning should exist. Because initially it was not something you talk about and so
So
on.
initially it was we don't need to plan towns,
We
just
don't need
people
to
just build randomly anywhere.
randomly, or you just call somebody from outside to come and prepare a document and say it's a town plan. The people are not associated, the decision makers are not associated. It's just seen as a project process. But I have been able to influence the process by getting those concerned understand that planning is participatory. You have to involve all stakeholders. You have to involve all stakeholders and it's also continuous. It's not something you stop.
Wow.
Once you start planning, you can only continue planning, and the responsibilities and the task increases. This far, the Cameroon has not been able to understand the element of planning being a process. They still stick to the idea of just preparing a document, even though we associate people in preparing a document. The other thing that we have achieved here is it took a long time for me to get people to understand that Cameroonians also have a responsibility to plan their own towns. They were counting on people from outside. And I had to go through to get those concerned understand that even if we plan and make mistakes, we have a right to make the mistakes to learn. You cannot learn without making mistakes. That's the idea of struggling. You learn by doing and failing and redoing. And so Cameroonians have got many more town planners. The process of preparing plans and so on is going on. The only thing that is lacking is that we have not yet accepted that it's a continuous process. That when you start, you continue and you keep solving the problems along the line and so on. And that is an element of struggling and succeeding. So we've succeeded to increase the awareness and so on, both institutionally and community-wise, about the importance of planning. But we are still trying to get the whole idea imbibed at all levels, at community level, not simply seeing planning as a money-earning profession. And this is where we are now. But we've done a lot to do that. And so I had to shift from actually planning to educating and sensitizing. So a good part of my life has been spent trying to get people understand what it is about and how it is being done. And I've been helped by international organizations that have engaged me, and I've been able to make the point. Like the European Union created a project they call Path Due, which is a program that enables you to work with the community and so on. And I happen to have led the team to plan 5 towns in Cameroon. In this process, we got the decision makers to understand first the process of preparing plans and getting people involved in the planning process. So we have made quite considerable progress in that respect. But this progress has to be materialized on the ground. This is where we're lacking. That's why the towns are as they are.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that in the course of time, at some point, we'll start seeing the effect on the ground, in reality.
When you bring in a new idea like that into a country, it takes generations to bring about change. And as you mentioned, it was new, and you have got it accepted now that cities have to be planned and they need to be a process. It's not a one-off write a document type of thing. It's a complete process. You talked about ownership. When there is ownership for change, and it comes back to what you said also in your first example, with respect to education, taking ownership for problems and solving them yourself, finding your own solutions rather than external solutions. and that you have to learn, you have to make mistakes. And when you have faced with a struggle, it's actually part of the process, making mistakes and learning from it. The problem is doing the same thing. And you referred to that previously also about changing tactics.
Yes.
Doing the same thing over and over and over is not going to solve the problem. If it's not working, learn
Change.
from it, change. And that's really something that it's very important for all struggles, but particularly with the problems with town planning in Cameroon, it's also extremely important. Is there anything else you want to share?
Well, the other thing I want to share concerning the professional, this thing, conventionally, town planning and town planner is seen as focusing only on towns. But we know that towns are complex entities. They involve every other activity.
Right.
Yeah, so I've been able to broaden the vision that you should not focus only on planning space. You have to plan all other activities that use space.
Wow.
Because without doing that, you are not solving any problem. So if you do not integrate all other aspects, economic, social, cultural, and refer to the lifestyles of people and things like that, you are not solving the problem. You may be creating a problem rather than solving.
Right.
So I've brought in that vision in practice. And so where the town planners today and the practice of town planning requires that you should be able to cut across sectors to be able to demonstrate how the impact on space and on towns and so on for the future.
Wow.
It takes a long time to do that. So the process is gradually developing. And, the results would take a time to be seen.
Wow. Really, really useful. You may hear some noise in the background. The rain is raining outside, and if it rains quite heavily, it rains here very often, and it's quite heavy rain. So you may hear the noise outside it because it's raining, and you probably saw me looking to the right a bit, the window, because it's raining quite profusely outside. But you may be able to hear the background. Apologies if you hear the background noise. Going back to the example you mentioned, I'm aware that there is now a Cameroon Town Planning Association.
Yeah.
When was that created, and how is that helping in the process of adopting the idea of town planning and also the process and what you've mentioned about learning and taking ownership? How does that help? How was that set up?
Well, the National Order of Cameroon Town Planners was created in 1985, and I was an actor in the process of creating it. And since 1985 today, it has grown from a few members to over 100, getting to 200 members. Before we were under 30 when it was created. It's supposed to create a forum for you to think and reflect and see the struggles and the successes. But unfortunately, it isn't really functioning like that because it was initially perceived by a number of people as a process of getting contracts to plan towns. That's not planning, it's business. And so the order is suffering from that element of seeing it as a profession that has a responsibility to educate, to sensitize, and to get things done rather than just making your own living out of the activity. So it's suffering from that aspect of this thing. But it's still very useful because we now got younger. Many more people are interested in planning, and many young people are coming into the profession and so on. So I think by creating the forum and so on, the only thing that the forum lacks is that in the modern world, you should have some channels of communicating, magazine, some platform where you can exchange professional ideas and so on. Up to today, since 85 to today, we haven't got. So that's one of the weaknesses of the other. The other thing that I've also realized in the planning is that we in the third world, we are overwhelmed by innovation for people who have already evolved. And sometimes we skip our own problems thinking that we will catch up with them. And by so doing, you're accumulating the problems because we are in a stage where they were several years ago and they're already solving their problems. We are jumping now to think that we are competing with them. Meanwhile, the old traditional problems are piling up. So this type of education or sort of awareness has to put that we have to do things that are relevant for our own state of development, our own social and cultural. It's one of the things that I've been trying to get the order and colleagues to understand that we cannot be running a race. When somebody has really gone so far and you think you're running a race with a person, you should prepare yourself for the race.
Wow. There's so much you've said there in a short space of time, and you've got my eyes spinning, and also my brain probably spinning, because there's so much you've said. I can see a theme through the examples you've talked about of education and getting first of all the family, and then also with the struggle you mentioned in the farm, the ranch, and then now with the town planning order or association. And then you also mentioned about business, financial aspect not being the main reason. And you also said that previously.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why there's been struggles with the order is that it had been perceived to be a source of income and contracts, rather than actually it's about planning the city towns so that they
solve
are
problems.
to solve problems, either social problems, health related problems, etc., for the community, keeping the community healthy and happy. And then you talked about now it's better with the struggles because there are more people on board now, and they've gone from few people to over 100 younger people, and now there's more diversity. But now there's a team, and it's not just one voice initially when you started off with the idea. It now a team, so it's now much more difficult, and probably it's going to accelerate now that there are more people. And then being relevant and adaptable, being flexible, changing tactics, but we need to find local solutions to our own local problems, not just transpose things from the West to our own setting that may not be relevant. So you need to understand your problem. And all these has made me think about the 5-step model, which I refer to in my book, Dr. Emmanuel's 5-step model, which starts with when you're faced with a struggle, first step is developing clarity, understanding the problem, and there are ways of doing this really well. And then secondly, getting commitment to solve the problem. After getting commitment is building a team, collaboration. And then after that, building a plan. And then after plan is implementing it. And then moving through those 5 steps quite smoothly to and fro, because it's not a one-way process. It's a continuum. So you mentioned, as a town planner, and also reflecting on the model, how does that 5-step model, how does that fit with you, and how do you see that model? Is there anything else you want to add to it? How do you feel it works?
Yeah, I was very, very impressed about the model because it sort of took into consideration the stages in the process of planning, which is iterative. You go forward and backward. It's not a one-dimensional thing. You just keep moving forward. And so the only way I think we can improve on that model is to ensure that the element of continuity, that for each stage, if you don't abandon, you don't say that you have moved from one stage to the other. It's something that overlaps. You keep going and it overlaps. And that is important. But the greatest difficulty in this context of planning and so on is that planning generally focuses more on common interest, public interest, than individual interest. In this society, the private interest is by far greater than public interest. And so you as a planner, when you are planning and you're talking about public interest and things like that, it doesn't sink, doesn't penetrate. Because people here are used to private interest and so on. Institutionally, they're concerned about private interests and so on. And so the planners in Cameroon have an uphill task. And a good number who perhaps have not got the commitment tend to favor the private interest because that's where they benefit from too, because they too have an interest in it.
That's interesting. Because the podcast audience is quite broad.
Yeah.
And just to put this into perspective and give a real example, what I'm hearing is there's always, in some struggles, there is a conflict between, for the solution, to solve the problem, there's a conflict between private interest and public interest or communal interest. Certainly in the world of town planning, for example, if you want to build a road, build houses somewhere, there may be a conflict in that building a house here may not be of benefit or may actually be risky or may cause harm and discomfort for the whole community. But it may be beneficial for an individual because they have their own home
Yeah.
and as they would like it. They may build close to a road or too close to a road, or they may obstruct other access for other facilities and other amenities. So how then my question to you is, when you're faced with that type of dilemma, private versus public interest within a struggle, how do you go about finding the solution? How do you go about still turning a struggle into success?
Yeah.
I know it's not going to be easy and there's no one answer fits all, but
Yeah.
what are the principles or the lessons?
Yeah, it's really a very difficult problem. First of all, because private interest is very strong and is backed and financed. Public interest is weak because there's nobody financing it. And therefore, when you take that position, you have to do a lot of homework to be able to go around convincing the stakeholders, and even the private interest persons have to understand that public interest will also help them.
Right.
So if you don't do that, there's no way you can score the goal.
So within the 5-step model, that is stage 2, building commitment.
Yeah.
Because the private versus public conflict suggests that there isn't commitment
Yeah.
for change. So if you go about trying to bring about change, you're not going to be able to really progress. So how do you again build that commitment in a community when there's a conflict between private and public interest for town planning, for example?
Yeah, what I do practically is to identify the private interest and the actors behind the private interest, try to get access to them, and to educate them to understand that promoting some public interest would also be beneficial to them.
So they have to see the benefit. Why?
Yeah,
Why?
Yeah, they want to see why. For example, is it not protecting your land and so on? But you know that if you protect land and you don't have access road to the land, and if your land does not have access to community facilities and so on, the value of the land cannot be higher than expected. So, but if you convince the land owner to understand that it's important to have access, it's important also to have some space for public community facilities that enhances the value of their property, then they will come on board. But if you just
see what is in it for
you, so they have to see that public interest is not necessarily eliminating or dampening private interest, that it enhances private interest and gives quality to whatever thing you're trying to do.
Interesting. And how do you do that in practice rather than just tell? And just telling them is unlikely to get them to see it. I mean, some may see it, but in your experience, what is the most effective way of getting them to see the value of public interest and what is in it for them as well? Because information is not always equivalent to behavioral change.
Well, what I have done in the past so far is to be able to use experiences from different communities outside Cameroon to demonstrate the transformation between unplanned and planned and the trade-off between private and public interests and so on, so that they can see. Because it adds to the durability of your property, it adds to so many things. When you don't show them that, what is happening somewhere else and so on, it will not mean much to them because it just becomes words. So I've been able to use experience from outside, in particular from Canberra, Australia, to show how transformation takes care of both private and public interest. And therefore, the fears should be dampened.
Okay.
Yeah.
You dropped that one in Canberra, Australia. You dropped that one in, and I think we'll come back to that in a minute because you just dropped that in. I'll come back to that. But I wanted to just focus on what you said about using examples. And in my book, From Struggle to Success, and in my experience, the most effective way to get people to have commitment is to tell stories because they have to see it or live it to be able to get commitment. Because commitment comes from the heart. And so they may understand it, but they don't yet feel it. And as a doctor, and also my experience of leadership in healthcare, it's about telling stories. And the examples you've just mentioned of using examples from another part of the world is telling stories. I also find that if you use examples, local examples, it also, because they can see it even clearer, because they can feel it and they can actually see it. Perhaps successful examples in other parts of Cameroon, as well as the examples we mentioned from Australia. How did you get to Australia? You dropped Australia in there, and now I think our podcast listeners really need to understand the link between Australia and Canberra and why you gave the example of Australia. I think I know why, but people listening to the podcast would know.
Well, it's how I got into Australia. Well, I did a professional course in town planning in the University of Kumasi, Ghana, but that was purely technical professional. And after having worked in the field of town planning and so on, before entering the university, I realized that the pure technical planning and so on was not enough, because you will not be able to explain why you are doing things. So along the line, I found out that it was possible for me to get to an institution where I would learn about the element of urban research. Urban research tries to explain why things are happening and why they're going wrong. That's the advantage I had. And this has actually improved on my professional listing, because you don't just say, like many planners just say, let this be here, let this be here. That's not good enough. You have to be able to explain the reason, the expected results, and so on. And if you do not understand the urban dynamics, you can't do that.
Wow.
And so that's how I got into the Australian National University, to be able to understand in the urban research unit what are the dynamics of cities.
Wow. Interesting. Now you understand why that exam was it. How did you get to go to Australia to study there? I can. You talked about being the first person in the family to get to go to school, and then you found yourself in Australia after that. So again, that I see that also as a struggle, ending up success, university in Australia, and education in town planning, university level education. How did that happen? Was that also?
Well, it's one of the things I try to explain to young people. There are so many opportunities in the world.
Wow.
You need to open up your mind. After having done the degree in town planning in the University of Kumasi, having a good pass, first class honors, the world was virtually open, and I had to make choices. And I was making a choice based on what I thought I needed. The next thing is to find out how is it going to be sponsored. There are so many young people who do not understand that there are opportunities in the world. So I came across a program where the university was offering scholarship, not only for you, but for your family and so on. And so I got in contact, and seeing my performance on my profile, the other one, it was a good offer. So that's how I got to Australia.
That's quite inspiring for everybody listening, but specifically for the younger population or groups, is listeners, is there are opportunities out there, and if you perform well, then opportunities come your way, and often with choice, you may have a bigger struggle of having to choose if you perform well. And so I hope it inspires you to work really hard, and especially those that are already are in education. We are coming close to the end of the podcast. I wanted to ask you if you had anything else you wanted to share in terms of when people are faced with a struggle, what with your experience is one thing they should do and one thing they should not do. What's the take home?
Okay. From my experiences, when you are faced with a problem, the first thing to do is to accept that you are part of the problem. You're part of the struggle.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Faced with a problem.
If you don't do
look
that,
inwards first.
Yeah, look inwards. If you don't do that, you will not be able to appreciate why the struggle is there and how to manipulate and get around the problem. So the first thing is to accept responsibility. And how do you do that? The people you are working or you are with, you should understand that it's because they don't understand you. So you have a lot of homework. The second thing is to do is to also accept that you still need to know a lot about them and why they're doing what they're doing. So the homework is first yours rather than blaming somebody.
So that is such a profound one that I want to also pause a bit, even though we're coming to the later part of the podcast, because it's not typically what people do when they're faced with a struggle. Often it's blame and it's somebody else. But you're saying from your experience and the wisdom here is when you're faced with a struggle, you should stop and look inwards and say, how did I contribute to this? How can I get to understand the problem and the people around? And how can I bring about change rather than blaming other people? That's right.
And there's one experience I want to share, which has influenced my life all through. I picked it up from a Swiss magazine. It says, everybody is your superior because he knows one thing you do not know. It knows at least one thing you do not know. And there's nobody who's super superior. So if you put yourself in that situation, you will then able to put yourself to try to understand the strength of the other people and how you can utilize them to solve your problem and to be successful. But if you think you're all knowledgeable, you're all skillful, that's the main block.
To stand from the pretext of I've just become I am a student, I am still learning. What can I learn? What can I learn from the others? Others, not I know it all.
Yeah.
No. And in terms of don'ts, is that a reflection of what you should not do? Think you know it all?
Yeah.
When you're faced
So
with a struggle.
the first thing is don't blame others.
And the second is
Yes. The second one is listen. 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 And I think the third one is improve on your communication.
communication.
Yeah, communication. Because you may have the ideas, you may have all of this, but you do not know how to communicate and the channels of communication, you will not be able to make the point. You will not be able to get people on board.
So the skill of turning struggle into success, communication is a vital part of it.
Yeah.
In terms of developing clarity, getting commitment, telling stories is part of communication. You have to speak to people and get to understand the problem. You have to also build a team, and you want to do that if you connect and communicate. And then developing a plan also takes communication, and then getting it done. Without you can have a plan, but you can't communicate it, or you can't communicate it, you can't really implement it. So you see, communication really cuts through all of that. Really, really useful. Again, you will hear maybe some sound in the background. That's rain, and you may have also heard thunder. So this is quite a special podcast because you also hear background noise, and it's natural noise, rain and thunder outside because of the rain in Douala, Cameroon. It's really an honor for me, and I said I could not miss the opportunity to sit down with my father, who has taught me a lot, and who I'm very, very grateful for getting me to where I am now. Everything that I do, everything that I have achieved is really linked to what he has done for me and what he has taught me, and probably unconsciously you've taught me town planning, and some of the things I've written in the book are probably quite unconsciously things that you have taught me right from childhood to now, and I'll continue to learn from his wisdom. And so I thought it would be really good to share your wisdom. And again, thank you very much for joining the podcast and for sharing your experience of turning struggles into success at the family level, also at the professional level, and all the wisdom. And I wonder whether there's anything else you wanted to say as a last word before I close.
Well, my last word is simply to appreciate the opportunity for you to have given me this chance to share these experiences with you and the world. And in particular, I'm really proud to be doing this because a lot of my age mates may not have this opportunity to do it, and to share it with your child is the greatest thing that can happen to a father. And I hope other generations will learn this, because ought to be able to hand down, able to see progress, and be part of it. So I'm really very, very grateful for the opportunity of sharing. And I hope people will appreciate it.
Thank you. I think you got me quite emotional there, and I am sure that people would appreciate it. And this podcast, organizing this podcast in itself was a struggle. Is a struggle to success, and we laugh because we try to do it virtually, and because Papa was in the village, you can understand it was a challenge to do that with internet access, computer access, etc. And so it's been a struggle, but it's now been a success because we managed to do it in Cameroon, in a hotel room, and despite thunder and lightning and rain outside making noise, we managed to do it. And organizing it in the here has not also been easy. There have been a number of barriers that we had to cross, but the hotel has also helped. When they understood why I was doing it, initially they set a fee
Okay.
for me to have this room. And then when I explained why I was doing it, and back to what you were saying, people understanding the benefit and the story behind it, they said no, they won't. I do not need. They won't charge me for it. It's complimentary. Again, another lesson. You see, this the struggle, turning struggles into success, and the reason for the podcast is you can use them in your favor, struggles, and you can become better, stronger, and more successful if you do so. It's a life skill. Some people do it naturally, but it can be learned. And if you use your struggles well, then each time you have one, you become better, stronger, and more successful. And it becomes natural. And you actually enjoy tackling struggles, converting them into success, and get fulfillment. And you may even find your purpose, etc., with turning struggles into success. And that's the reason for this podcast. And so I close by asking you to share the podcast. You may change somebody's life. You are going to help somebody if you share it. Like, comment also if you have on your own experience. And if there's anybody else you want us to interview on this podcast, please do also suggest potential people who can come as guests. And with that, I want to thank all of you again for listening. Thank you for promoting this podcast. And thank you to our very, very special guest, Papa Zachary Nsutebu, my father, who has helped really been the force for our family to be where it is now. And I mean not nuclear family, but extended family, as well as a force for town planning to develop as a profession in Cameroon. And he has also touched a lot of lives wherever he has been. And that's the reason why the Suitable name is quite popular. It's not thanks to me, it's thanks to him. And most places where I go and I mention the name Suitable, they know who the person is, and that's thanks to him. So again, it's an honor, and I'm blessed, feel really blessed to be recording this podcast. You can still hear the rain outside, a lot of noise in the background. That's Cameroon, and I'm enjoying it. And once more, thank you all listeners. Share, like, and comment, and see you on the next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ah!